Howdy everybody, Doug with Tusk Consulting. If you are looking for a political consultant and you are a pro-gun Republican, drop me an email, tuskconsulting@gmail.com, tuskconsulting@gmail.com. If you're not a pro-gun Republican, find somebody else because I'm not interested. Welcome to the cigar smoke-filled back room. For those wondering, this is a Five Vegas cigar. No, they're not sponsors to the program, but you know, if they want to be, they could drop me an email and we could work something out. Anyhow, I'm going to do a series of videos here about politics, things that aren't talked about enough or aren't talked about honestly enough. And today this is going to be about polling. Now, people love to talk about polling results. Polling results we differentiate from election results, like yesterday was the New Hampshire primary. Now, a primary, that's an election. We have hard data. We know what the rules are. These people can vote, these people can't vote. We can look at the results. There's also exit polling. When people leave the polls, they're asked questions. That's very different than what the election result is, right? It's correlated, but the point is that not everybody talks to the pollsters when they leave. But the election data for sure we can look at and say, okay, people who were registered Republicans, this percentage voted for Trump, and people who were independents, this percentage voted for Haley, and so on and so forth. That's not what I'm talking about. That's election data. That is good, juicy, hard data. We're talking about polling. And people love polls. Some people hate polls. And some people do both depending on what the poll says. And this is one of the problems. See, a lot of times, people will say they don't like polling. A year or so ago, 6 months ago even, a lot of folks on my side of the aisle, and I like Trump, were saying, the polls are lies, and the polls are wrong, the polls are garbage. But then Trump starts doing well in the polls against Biden, and all of a sudden, the polls are just A-okay. Because whose ox is being gored, right? Well, that's inconsistent, and I'm not a big fan of inconsistency. So, now, have things changed? Sure, the battlefield has changed. That doesn't mean that 6 months ago they were necessarily wrong. But here's the thing. When you hear of a polling result, you need to ask yourself one fundamental question. But did you pay for it? Because if you didn't pay for the poll, you don't know what it is that is trying to be pushed onto you. And I don't want to hear this, an internal poll says this. No. If you're hearing about it, unless you're part of the campaign, when I say part of the campaign, I mean an integral part, paid staffer, top-level donor, and even then maybe somebody inside the actual boiler room of the campaign. Unless you're one of those people who paid for it, you don't know what a poll says. And just because they leaked an internal poll result doesn't mean that it's honest, okay? Why'd they leak it? They leaked it because it said something they wanted everybody to believe. If they took an internal poll and it said something they didn't like, you think they'd leak that? No. So, there's a lot of ways we can skew polls other than what I just said, right? If we take a poll, we like what it says, we leak it. We take a poll, we don't like what it says, we bury it. Shh, don't say anything about that. Just put it over here, right? My trash can's over there. Ashtray's over here. That's one way we can mess with polls. Another way, different sample sizes. Large sample sizes are generally considered better than small sample sizes. Demographics. We can oversample certain demographics to get a response that we want. What's the average age? For sake of conversation, let's say the average age of a voter is 55 years old. Somebody actually shows up at the polls in a presidential election year. 55 is average age. Just throw that out there for the sake of conversation. So if we have a candidate who is preferred by younger people, we could oversample, say, 18 to 30-year-olds, right? And if this is somebody that younger people like, and we oversample, we have 1,000 people we survey, and we have a larger percentage in our poll of 18 to 30-year-olds than typically shows up on election day, then we can skew the results to favor our candidate. And these are the sort of things they don't tell you. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they'll release the internals. Sometimes they'll show demo slices. And this is where the good political nerds really like to chow down on the data. That's one we can do. Another way we can do it is by who are we sampling? Are we sampling adults? Are we sampling 18 and up? Are we sampling registered voters? Are we sampling likely voters? These are very different groups, okay, with different responses. 18 plus is going to give you different answers than likely voters. So there's another way we can do it. We can oversample for different demographics in terms of education. Let's say we have a candidate that's very beloved of the intelligentsia. They stick their pinky finger out when they, sip their brandy. So we oversample people with college educations. Instead of roughly 25-ish% of America that has a college education. Instead, let's say we sample 40% of respondents have a college education. Wow, now we can shift the results our way a little more. And it's another way that we can also do it by gender. And we can oversample women or undersample women. All kinds of ways that you can shift these results by shifting who it is that we talk to when we do our poll. Okay, so we can also have what are called push questions. Regardless of how we skew the sample, we can change the way people think about things by pushing a particular result that we want, by leading them to a particular conclusion. For instance, let's say you got somebody run for dog catcher, and the current dog catcher, very well qualified, very experienced, really great person. The challenger to the dog catcher has really high name ID, a lot of money, but doesn't know anything, couldn't tell a dog from a cat with a water pistol to their head. So, but they got a lot of name ID, right? And the incumbent, let's just say for this conversation, dog catcher is not a high interest race, and so most people don't know who the dog catcher is. Okay. So what do? Well, you do a poll and you start out with the obligatory demo questions, right? Your age range, highest level of education attained, yada yada, all that. And then you get into hey, do you know Joe Blow? Do you know Jane Doe? And maybe they do, maybe they don't. That's kind of your first cut of, okay, what's the name ID of these candidates? And then you say, did you know that Jane Doe is the incumbent dog catcher? Well, I didn't know that. And then you say, did you know that Joe Blow couldn't tell a doggy from a kitty with a water pistol to their forehead? Oh, I didn't know that. And then you go on and you ask questions like, did you know that if Joe Blow becomes dog catcher that, dogs and cats will live together and there will be mass hysteria? Gee, I didn't know that. And then you close with, now that you know that Joe Blow is a terrible, awful puppy hater, and Jane Doe is also has a side veterinary practice and is a licensed dog groomer, who would you vote for dog catcher? Well, of course I'd vote for Jane Doe. Yeah, naturally, yeah. So that's another way you can push these things. But look at that, and there's reasons why you do that. Not just because you get a result you want, but also to get a result for a particular audience. Because remember, when you are the audience, the recipient of polling data, you must ask the question, but did you pay for it? Because if you didn't, people are trying to move you. They're trying to persuade you with this data. So, what does all this mean? Well, I'll give you an example of how you can use these kind of push questions. So, a candidate is talking to a prospective donor, and they say, look, my opponent's got a lot of name ID, but when voters find out that he's, doesn't really like doggies and kitties, and people find out that I've got a dog grooming business, then the support shifts to me overwhelmingly. Oh, wow, that's very interesting. And it's an attempt to get the donor, and they've got all these graphs and percentages that they throw at them. And because most people, when numbers start getting cited, their eyes glaze over, right? I have a degree in engineering. Numbers don't make my eyes glaze over, bro. But they do this to people to try to get them to be like, oh, well, they must know what they're talking about, and open their checkbook. So, that is one way to do it. And look, I'm here to tell you, I've done this. I've been part of commissioning a poll. We had an incumbent that was facing a very strong challenger. We needed resources. And so we commissioned a poll to show that when people found out about the incumbent, that it shifted from this challenger who was, had very high name ID to all of a sudden now the incumbent had a better chance of winning. And this, again, this poll, that poll result that I'm talking about, I'm not going to identify it, but it was something that was never released into the public domain. I didn't call up the Cleveland Plain Dealer or whatever and say, hey, check out this poll, because that wasn't my target. My target was donors who could contribute to the campaign, resources we could gather, and we wanted to make the case for those resources with polling results. But remember, the people we presented to the polling results to did not pay for it, okay? The people like me who wanted them to do a particular thing paid for it so that we could get them to agree with us and fork over some resources. So that's another way that polls are used to kind of skew things. So when you see these polls where, Trump's beating Biden here, but Biden's beating Trump there, and all this, ask yourself, okay, how many people did you talk to? Are they likely voters? What percent, how the breakdown go with educational levels, with gender, etc.? Are we talking about swing state poll, or is this a New York State poll? Because New York State ain't going for Trump, okay? Yes, he lived there most of his life. He's a quintessential New Yorker. New York ain't voting for him. This is how it is. So, you got to ask yourself these questions. But even if you know the answer to them, unless you see the questions, and if you do see the questions, which you probably won't get to see, even then you should be skeptical, because it got released to you who did not pay for it for a reason. If they had had the same poll and it showed a bad result, they never would have let you see it, okay? So that's my thing, that's my little shtick about poll results and polling and sampling and all that. So next time you see a poll, bear in mind that there's a lot of ways it can be skewed. There's going to be a multi-way race. Actually, we have a multi-way race going on right now in my home state of Ohio. And we got 3 different candidates, and they all 3 have polls that show that they're in the lead. Now, clearly, at least 2 of those are wrong, right? Clearly, at least 2 of them are wrong. And before you ask who I think, that's not the point. The point is, 3 different campaigns running for the same office released poll results that are mutually incompatible, right? They cannot all be true. But they want you to believe that their line is true. Really what they're doing is they're saying, look, if you believe in us, you should buy our poll and believe in our poll and take that and push it to other people and convince them so that people will believe that we really are winning, okay? Look, be skeptical. Because look, right now, back to Trump v. Biden, the same people who are telling you that Trump is doing really well against Biden, and he very well may be, those same people, you know what they don't talk about in those polls? Favorability. And remember, I'm a Trump guy. But the favorable, unfavorable in those very polls for Trump ain't exactly positive. But people on my side of the aisle that are trying to pump up the Trump is electable, Trump can beat Biden line, they don't want to tell you about Trump's favorable, unfavorable, right? Why would they? They have an agenda. They have an axe to grind. And it's one I agree with, right? I want to see Trump beat Biden. Of course I do. Duh. But there's truths in those polls that they don't highlight because it doesn't agree with their talking points, okay? So even when they present to you poll results, they may not be presenting all the poll results. It's not fully in context. And it ain't fully in context for a reason. Again, I'm Doug with Tusk Consulting. Drop me a line, tuskconsulting@gmail.com, tuskconsulting@gmail.com. And remember, when it comes to polls, did you pay for it?